the reality is that all models that we use in finance are not terribly good, representations of the way the world works. If you look at Black-Scholes, we know that the log normal assumption underlying Black-Scholes does not correspond to the truth. Okay, and that's why people use volatility smiles and volatility surfaces and all that sort of thing. And the same is true about the Gaussian copula model. It's not a good description of the world, but it's giving, what the model is doing is giving a trader a framework for thinking about the world. And, I think, models, in my opinion, for the most part, serve two purposes. The first purpose is what I've just said, to give the trader a framework for thinking about the world. And the sort of model the trader really likes is a simple model that the trader can get his head around, or her head around, which, has a one-to-one correspondence with a price in the market and what we call a free parameter. I mean, why Black-Scholes has been so successful is because there's only one parameter that's not directly observable, and that's volatility. So you can go from a price in the market to implied volatility, or the other way around. That's the sort of model the trader loves. Or, the Gaussian copula model, you can go from a price in the market to an implied correlation, or the other way around. That's what traders like, and once they've got that sort of a model, traders can use the model, and this is the other purpose of the model is to say, how do I, there are some prices I can observe in the market, and other prices that I can't observe in the market, but the deals are kind of similar to the deals that trade in the market. So what I want to use the model for is really as a sophisticated interpolation tool. And so that's the second purpose of models, as a sophisticated interpolation tool. And that's, when you actually look at it, that's how Black-Scholes is used. It's used as a sophisticated interpolation tool. You back out implied volatilities, you interpolate between the implied volatilities, you go off and you price something else, and you feel fairly confident because you're using the model twice. You're using the model once to back out the implied volatilities, and another time to, to price whatever it is you're interested in. The actual model risk you're taking is relatively small. And the same is true if you use the Gaussian copula model in that way. But it's important to understand the limitations of models. And so I would say the blame for the crisis lies on the people who use the models, not on the models themselves. It's very important that we understand that all of these models are poor representations of reality. And, the model has limited, those two limited objectives that I was talking about. And if you try to sort of assume that the model is giving you some fundamental truth, then you're pushing the model too hard, and it's the person who's using the model that's really to blame, not the model itself, because the model, as I say, all models in finance pretty much are very poor representations of reality. We should just understand what the true purpose of a model is.
Going after Dr. Hull makes life very difficult from a mathematical standpoint. So I'm going to not look at things from a mathematical standpoint and use the allegory of a vehicle instead. How many of us here own our own vehicles? Can I show of hands? You have a two-wheeler or a four-wheeler. The purpose of the vehicle is to take you from place A to place B. You could have a Ford Focus, somebody else could have a BMW, an Audi. The structures are different, but the objective is the same, to go from place A to place B. The crisis resulted because a lot of bankers decided to take these cars, these vehicles, and race them in Monaco, and race them in Le Mans, and race them in Silverstone in the UK. And these models were not fit for purpose. When you take a vehicle which is supposed to run on this main road for 3 kilometers up and down, without breaking down, and then you take it and then put it in a fast track that's going round and round the circle of greed, what you have is not model risk. What you have is greed. When the world was operating on 25 basis points margin, and when somebody comes along and says, hey, you know what? I have this wonderful 3-letter acronym or 4-letter acronym called CDO or CPDO or ABCD or whatever, and this is going to give you a yield of 10% and 12%, your vehicle starts to move from the main road and starts to move towards the fast track to perdition. So to blame a model for what is essentially a human failing is sad. It is time that we realize that models have been there in the past, and as Dr. Hull elucidated very clearly, and most of these models are not good representations of reality. As a past banker, I can tell you that the only model that has been used consistently in banking, not just in the derivatives world, but in banking in general, is the net present value structure. And after that, models have been the esoteric province of people on the 14th floor or in the basement. There is no in-between here. So what is required is for us to take a deep breath and say, it was not the model. It was not the person who ran the model. I mean, the person who ran the model was not on any fancy bonus structure and did not get $1 million payouts. The greed that started from the very top cascaded down. It flushed out all the models and made those models completely redundant. So that is my viewpoint on what the crisis was. As to moving forward, regulation, again, I have a very simplistic take on it. Between the years of our Lord 1950 and 1988, we had one key regulation. In 1988, we had Basel, and that was stagnant till 1996. And then we said, the JP Morgan approach looks good, let's adopt that. And we had market risk. And in 2001, we applied some more models for Basel II. And then suddenly, ladies and gentlemen, 2, 3, 4, 2.5, 17.5, pi to the square of 3. How many Basel variations have we seen in the last year? The horse is gone. The systemic crisis that enveloped the world has resulted in so many failures, resulting in the horse being bolted. And what we are now doing is playing catch up with silly regulation for the most part. And this needs to stop. There needs to be sensible regulation tied in to more realistic models. And this is where there needs to be, like private-public partnership, an academic regulatory participation which results in a more structured use of models.
As you have just said, the models are just a representation of reality, and it has nothing to do with the model itself. So whether the authorities are trying to catch up or not, all these statistical models that we all use give us statistical numbers to take decisions. And so the relation geometric, at the very least, has been very tough, I guess. So I really don't find it trying to catch up, at least here. And I agree with fellows of this panel that it is not the models themselves, it is not the regulators themselves who have caused the crisis. And it is also maybe the lack of knowledge of people who use them, as just Dr. John Hull said, or the greed, as you have just said. That's the most important thing. And I guess the regulation, maybe it's okay, it's going after the models, but I guess it will be more important to go to the top management, just to decide how we are going to use not the models, but how are we going to drive the business itself. Because what it happens here, and I guess in many markets, is, let's say, I'm in a trading desk. I was a trader for several years. You made a profit of 100 million, and then next year, your bosses, they want you to make 200 million. From where? From out of the blue. You've got the same models, you've got a tougher regulation, And actually, well, that will not stop you from taking risks. I mean, not the models. What it will want to stop you from taking risks is because you have to comply with a new budget. And this new budget, no matter what, you have to do it with the same resources. So the same models, the same regulations, and that's where the problem comes in. So the models have nothing to be blamed of. Authorities, at least in this country, I guess, are doing quite a good job. And they are not to be blamed either because of this. So it is the people, as a conclusion, as you just have said, that use the models who have caused the crisis. So even though the authorities seems to be learning from the banks, I don't think that's really the problem of this. So we take more risks because we need more profit today. That's my conclusion.
At least in the context that you're asking, high-frequency trading, regulations need to be very dynamic and flexible. And the reason is there are these areas of finance like complex exotic derivatives and high frequency that are evolving all the time. And as soon as you set some rules, someone will figure out a way to circumvent them and essentially make them worthless. So the approach that I think regulators have taken so far is what one friend once described as the rules of the road applied to aircraft. So it's like using rules like circuit breakers and speed limits and maximum number of cancellation rates. So all these regulations are so 20th century. It just doesn't make any sense because there are so many ways to avoid showing up in these stats. So this is the kind of approach that was taken after the flash crash of May 6, 2010. And during this regulation, then Europe took the approach, and there was a law that was passed a few months ago in Germany. Essentially, the approach that they take is there is a maximum number of messages that you can send, and also to impose some taxes on violations, and also to ask traders to submit algorithms for approval. So that sounds like a reasonable approach, that not every algo could be run in the market, but essentially what happens is that there is no way to comply with that, because algos, number one, if you tell the regulator the algo that you are going to run, probably the person in the regulator's office who is reviewing the algo is probably going to launch a hedge fund tomorrow, especially if the algo is successful. But number two, there is also the problem that algos need to be tweaked and adjusted all the time. So these are the two approaches that have been used so far, and the one that I would favor is to use organisms like FINRA and self-regulatory organisms to come up with proposals of what is going to save the business, because certainly they have the vested interest. They don't want their business to be destroyed. They don't want finance to collapse. So they come up with some proposals. Of course, the regulator will have to give the okay. And the kind of proposals that I would suggest are indices. So let's say that we identify a number of malpractices that can be evaluated through 50 real-time indices that can be monitored in real time. And so what the regulation is going to do is not going to ask for a legalistic proof of wrongdoing, like market manipulation, which is incredibly hard to prove. It's almost, actually I think that there are 2 or 3 firms that have ever been, large firms that have been prosecuted for market manipulation. It's so hard to prove that essentially it's like there is no regulation. So the alternative would be to come up with a number of indices that are proposed by the industry, and anyone who causes these indices to cross a certain number of thresholds, then these people are issued a ticket, very much like what happens when you speed up. And so this is not, what I'm suggesting is not a regulation that you put in a book. It's not a regulation that is 10,000 pages. Essentially, it's a bunch of equations. You say, look, if you are running an algorithm, and this algorithm is going to cause these indices to cross a certain threshold, you're going to be issued a ticket. And in that way, what you have is, if, let's say in 2 weeks, we identify that some new algo, predatory algo, is in the market that is causing markets, we tweak the index. And suddenly you have perfect knowledge, right? Everyone is able to replicate that index. Everyone is able to see what these indices are saying. And if someone accidentally sees that it's about to cross that index, they always have the opportunity to shut down. So this is the kind of regulations that I think would work in an environment that is very dynamic, very advanced, very complex.